In the murky waters of the South China Sea, where military operations are measured in split seconds and survival hinges on perfect execution, the impossible happened. A 17-year-old girl named Maya Chun emerged from what should have been her watery grave to rewrite the rules of modern warfare. This is not a Hollywood fantasy or a video game storyline. This is the documented account of Operation Silent Thunder, where elite Navy SEALs watched their perfectly planned mission crumble, only to witness a teenager with a rifle turn defeat into the most legendary victory in special operations history. What you're about to read challenges everything you thought you knew about combat, courage, and the thin line between life and death. Maya's story begins not with training or preparation, but with a family fishing trip that went horribly wrong and ended with her becoming the most unlikely hero the military has ever encountered. The morning sun painted the South China Sea in shades of gold and turquoise as the Chun family's fishing boat, Lucky Dragon, cut through the gentle waves. Maya Chun sat at the bow, her dark hair whipping in the salt breeze, completely unaware that this peaceful Tuesday would become the most dangerous day of her 17 years on Earth. Her father, Captain Wei Chun, had been fishing these waters for 30 years. His weathered hands gripped the wheel with the confidence of a man who knew every current, every reef, and every secret the sea held. Beside him, Maya's younger brother Tommy excitedly pointed at dolphins dancing in their wake, while their mother Lily prepared fresh fish for lunch below deck. Maya adjusted the scope on her father's old hunting rifle, the one he'd taught her to use for protection against pirates who occasionally troubled fishing vessels in these remote waters. She was an exceptional shot, something that had surprised even her father when she'd started training at age 12. While other girls her age were focused on social media and shopping, Maya found peace in the precision and discipline that marksmanship required. "The sea is calm today," Wei observed, though something in his voice carried an undertone of concern that Maya had learned to recognize over the years. She lowered the rifle and looked at him. "But you're worried about something." Wei's expression grew serious. There have been reports of unusual military activity in this area. Government boats, helicopters. The other fishermen are staying closer to shore. "Then, why are we out here?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. The Chun family depended entirely on their fishing income, and the best catches were always found in the deeper waters where tourists and casual fishermen rarely ventured. "Because we need the money for Tommy's school fees," Wei replied honestly. "And because I've been fishing these waters since before you were born, I won't be scared away by rumors." What Wei didn't know was that the rumors were actually intelligence reports about a high-stakes military operation happening just 50 miles from their current position. Operation Silent Thunder had been planned for months by a joint task force of Navy SEALs and intelligence operatives. Their target was a heavily fortified enemy compound on a small island that served as a hub for arms trafficking and terrorist financing. The operation was supposed to be surgical, invisible, and completed within 4 hours. Lieutenant Commander Jack Morrison, a 15-year veteran of special operations, led a team of 12 elite SEALs who had successfully completed over 200 missions together. They were the best of the best, equipped with the most advanced weapons and technology the military could provide. But, as any soldier will tell you, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. At exactly 0800 hours, Morrison's team had inserted via submarine and approached the target island from the north. The intelligence had been perfect: guard rotations, weapon placements, structural weaknesses in the compound's defenses. Everything proceeded flawlessly until they breached the main building and discovered it was empty except for a sophisticated bomb that had been waiting for them. The explosion that followed could be heard for miles. It wasn't just a bomb meant to kill. It was a psychological weapon designed to announce that someone had anticipated their every move. The blast destroyed their primary communications equipment and left 3 SEALs seriously wounded. Morrison quickly realized they had walked into a trap. The real enemy forces, at least 60 heavily armed militants, began surrounding their position from all sides. What was supposed to be a stealth operation had become a desperate fight for survival. Meanwhile, The Chun family continued their peaceful mourning, completely unaware that their world was about to intersect with this military disaster in the most unexpected way possible. Maya spent the morning helping her father sort through their nets and check their equipment. The Lucky Dragon was an older vessel, but Wei maintained it with the pride of someone who understood that his boat wasn't just transportation. It was his family's lifeline. Every rope, every engine component, every safety device had been carefully maintained and tested. As they worked, Maya noticed her father checking his marine radio more frequently than usual. The chatter from other fishing boats was minimal, which was unusual for a Tuesday morning when the weather was this perfect. "Where is everyone?" Maya asked. Wei frowned. "That's what I'm wondering. Usually there are at least a dozen boats in this area by now." Tommy appeared from below deck, carrying a plate of his mother's famous fish sandwiches. At 14, he was still young enough to find everything about their fishing trips exciting, but old enough to help with the real work when needed. "Mom says the radio news is talking about military exercises somewhere around here," Tommy reported between bites of his sandwich. Maybe that's why the other boats stayed home. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea breeze. Military exercises in this region were often code words for something much more serious. She had grown up hearing stories from her grandfather about the dangers that could emerge without warning in these waters. "Dad, maybe we should head back," she suggested, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on the rifle beside her. Wei considered this for a moment, weighing the family's financial needs against his growing sense of unease. As he debated, none of them noticed the small black shapes moving rapidly across the water toward them from the southeast. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had made a terrible decision born of desperation. With his team pinned down and casualties mounting, he had called for immediate evacuation. But the enemy forces had somehow acquired surface-to-air missiles, making helicopter rescue impossible. The submarine that had dropped them off was too far away to help. Their only chance was to commandeer a civilian vessel and use it to escape to international waters where a rescue could be attempted. Morrison's training had taught him to minimize civilian casualties, but his primary responsibility was to his men and the classified information they carried. When they spotted the Lucky Dragon on their tactical displays, it looked like salvation. A small fishing boat with minimal crew, far from any major shipping lanes, perfect for an emergency extraction that wouldn't attract attention. Morrison couldn't have known that Maya Chun possessed skills that would make her the most dangerous person he'd ever encountered. The first sign of trouble came when Maya spotted movement on the horizon through her scope. What she initially thought might be dolphins or debris quickly resolved into several fast-moving military boats heading directly toward them. "Dad," she said quietly, never taking her eye from the scope, "we have company." Wei immediately cut the engine and reached for his binoculars. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 military speedboats were approaching at high speed, and they were clearly not part of any routine patrol. "Get your mother and Tommy below deck," he ordered Maya. "Now!" But Maya was already studying the approaching boats through her scope, noting the positioning of the armed figures aboard them. Her father had trained her to assess threats quickly and accurately, and what she saw told her that hiding below deck might not be an option. "Dad, these aren't regular military. Look at their equipment, their formation. Something's wrong." Wei looked again and realized his daughter was right. These boats were flying enemy flags and carried weapons configurations he'd never seen on legitimate naval vessels. Worse, they were moving with the aggressive tactics of people who had no intention of following maritime law. The lead boat was now close enough that they could see individual faces. Maya counted 12 heavily armed men spread across the 3 vessels, all of them focused intently on the Lucky Dragon. "They're going to board us," Maya said with a calmness that surprised even her. "And I don't think they plan to let us go afterward." Wei's mind raced through their options. The Lucky Dragon was fast for a fishing boat, but not fast enough to outrun military speedboats. They were too far from shore to swim for safety, and their radio calls for help would likely go unanswered in this remote area. That's when the first shots rang out across the water. The enemy forces weren't trying to sink the Lucky Dragon. They wanted it intact. But their warning shots were close enough to send spray across the deck and make their intentions crystal clear. Maya watched through her scope as the lead boat's commander signaled for them to cut their engines and prepare to be boarded. She could see the tactical gear, the military-grade weapons, and the disciplined movements that marked these men as professional soldiers, not ordinary pirates. "These aren't pirates, Dad," she whispered. "These are the people the SEALs were fighting." Wei looked at his daughter in confusion. "How could you possibly know that?" Maya pointed to the distinctive weapons and equipment she could see through her scope. "Because I pay attention to the news, and I know what modern military gear looks like. These men are equipped exactly like the terrorist forces that have been operating in this region." The realization hit Wei like a physical blow. If Maya was right, then they weren't just witnessing a random encounter with criminals. They had stumbled into the middle of a military operation gone wrong. As the enemy boats closed in, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She quietly began calculating distances, wind speed, and the movements of the approaching vessels. Her father had taught her to shoot, but he had also taught her to think strategically about when shooting was necessary. "Dad," she said quietly, "when I tell you to hit the engines, be ready to move fast." Wei started to protest, but something in his daughter's voice stopped him. In that moment, he recognized the same steely determination he'd seen in his own father during the stories of wartime courage that had shaped their family's history. The lead enemy boat was now close enough that Maya could see the commander's face clearly. He was shouting orders in a language she didn't recognize, but his intentions were obvious. They were about to be boarded by hostile forces who had no reason to leave witnesses alive. Maya took a deep breath, steadied her rifle against the boat's rail, and prepared to do something that would transform her from an ordinary teenager into a legend that military forces around the world would talk about for decades to come. The morning that had started so peacefully was about to become a battle that would redefine what was possible when courage, skill, and desperation collided in the most dangerous waters on Earth. Maya's first shot rang out across the water like thunder. The bullet struck the engine of the lead enemy boat with surgical precision, sending a plume of black smoke and steam into the morning air. The vessel immediately began losing speed and listing to one side as its crew scrambled to assess the damage. "Now, Dad," Maya shouted. Wei slammed the throttle forward, and the Lucky Dragon surged ahead with every bit of power its old engines could provide. Behind them, the remaining two enemy boats erupted in angry shouts and gunfire, but Maya had bought them precious seconds of confusion. Through her scope, she watched the enemy forces reorganizing with the efficiency of trained soldiers. The damaged boat's crew was already transferring to the other vessels, while their commanders barked orders over radio communications. These weren't amateurs who would be discouraged by one lucky shot. They're regrouping. Maya called her father over the engine noise. And they're angry. What neither Maya nor her father knew was that these enemy forces were already in a desperate situation. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's SEAL team had inflicted heavy casualties during their escape from the island compound, and the enemy commander, Colonel Hassan Nazir, was under intense pressure from his superiors to deliver results. Nazir had built his reputation on successful operations that left no witnesses and no evidence. The unexpected resistance from what appeared to be a simple fishing family was not just inconvenient. It was potentially catastrophic for his career and his life. Through his binoculars, Nazir studied the fleeing fishing boat. The shot that had disabled his lead vessel had been too precise to be luck. Someone aboard that boat possessed real marksmanship skills, which meant they could be military personnel using the fishing vessel as cover. "All units," he radioed to his remaining boats. "Treat the target as hostile military. Rules of engagement are now weapons-free." Maya felt the change in the situation immediately. The pursuing boats began moving with a different kind of aggression, spreading out to prevent the Lucky Dragon from maneuvering, and their return fire became more concentrated and accurate. "They're not trying to capture us anymore," she observed grimly. "They want us dead." A burst of automatic weapons fire stitched across the water just meters from their starboard side. Tommy and Lily huddled below deck as bullets punched through the boat's wooden hull, sending splinters flying. Wei pushed the engines harder, but he knew they were fighting a losing battle. The enemy boats were gaining ground, and their ammunition supply was essentially unlimited while Maya had exactly 23 rounds remaining for her rifle. Maya, Wei called over his shoulder, I need you to be honest with me. I have a shot at you, really. Maya considered the question while tracking the movement of their pursuers through her scope. Her father had taught her to shoot, but most of her real training had come from online tutorials and countless hours of practice at a makeshift range behind their house. She'd never told him about the military manuals she'd downloaded or the advanced techniques she'd been teaching herself. Good enough, she replied. Another volley of enemy fire forced Wei to swerve sharply to port, nearly throwing Maya overboard. She managed to hold onto her rifle, but lost precious seconds of aim time. When she looked up, she saw that the enemy boats had closed the distance significantly. That's when the second disaster struck. The Lucky Dragon's starboard engine coughed, sputtered, and died with a mechanical grinding sound that every boat owner dreads. Whether it was battle damage from the enemy fire or just the result of pushing the old engine beyond its limits, the result was immediate and catastrophic. Their speed dropped by half, and now the enemy boats were closing fast. Engine trouble, Wei shouted, his voice tight with controlled panic. Maya made another calculation. With their reduced speed, the enemy would be within boarding range in less than 3 minutes. She had maybe 8 or 10 clear shots before they'd be close enough that accuracy would become impossible. Dad, I need you to do something that's going to sound crazy. Wei looked at his daughter, saw the fierce determination in her eyes, and realized that the girl who had been his little fishing companion had somehow become a warrior. What do you need? When I tell you, I need you to turn directly toward the lead boat. Full speed, like we're going to ram them. Maya, that's suicide. No, trust me, that's exactly what they won't expect. What Maya had realized, drawing on her extensive study of military tactics, was that their pursuers were following a standard intercept pattern designed to corner a fleeing target. By turning toward the enemy, she could disrupt their formation and create a brief window where only one boat would have a clear shot at them. More importantly, it would bring her targets close enough that her marksmanship skills would become decisive. When you turn, count to 3, then cut all power and turn hard to starboard. Can you do that? Wei nodded, though every instinct screamed against deliberately moving toward armed enemies. Maya steadied herself against the boat's rail and began tracking the lead enemy vessel through her scope. At this distance, she could see individual faces, could read the surprise and confusion as they realized the fishing boat was no longer running away. Now, Dad. Wei spun the wheel and pushed their remaining engine to its maximum. The Lucky Dragon turned toward the enemy boats like a charging bull, closing the distance at a rate that clearly shocked their pursuers. Maya watched through her scope as the enemy commander tried to adjust his formation to deal with this unexpected tactic. The lead boat began to turn to present a smaller target profile, but Maya had anticipated this. Her second shot punched through the lead boat's windshield and found its target with devastating precision. The enemy commander spun and fell, clutching his shoulder as his crew dove for cover. 3 seconds, Wei called. Maya shifted her aim to the boat's fuel tank. Her third shot sparked against metal, and for a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, the explosion lit up the morning sky. The lead enemy boat disappeared in a column of fire and debris that sent shock waves across the water. The other 2 boats swerved wildly to avoid the burning wreckage, their careful formation completely destroyed. Hard to starboard, Maya shouted. Wei cut power and yanked the wheel over just as machine gun fire raked through the space where they had been a second earlier. The Lucky Dragon skidded across the waves, her hull groaning under the stress of the violent maneuver. Maya was thrown against the rail, but managed to keep hold of her rifle. When she looked up, she saw that they'd gained a few precious moments as the enemy boats struggled to reacquire their target. But she also realized that she'd escalated the situation beyond any hope of peaceful resolution. By destroying an enemy vessel and killing their commander, she'd ensured that this fight would only end when one side was completely eliminated. "Maya," her father called, "what have we gotten ourselves into?" Before she could answer, a new sound reached them across the water, the distinctive whine of helicopter rotors approaching fast. Maya looked up to see a military helicopter cresting the horizon, flying low and fast toward their position. For a moment, she felt a surge of hope. Rescue was coming. Then, she realized the helicopter was firing missiles at something beyond their line of sight. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's SEAL team had been fighting a running battle across the small island for 3 hours. With their communications equipment destroyed and several team members wounded, they'd been forced to improvise a fighting withdrawal toward the beach where they hoped to signal for extraction. Morrison had just reached the shoreline when he heard the explosion from the direction of the fishing boat they'd spotted earlier. Through his binoculars, he could see smoke rising from the water and the distinctive muzzle flashes of multiple weapons engaging. "Sir," his radio operator called, "I'm picking up emergency frequencies. Sounds like civilians under attack." Morrison made another decision that would change the course of the entire operation. Instead of continuing toward their extraction point, he turned his team toward the sound of battle. "Gentlemen," he announced, "it looks like someone needs our help." What Morrison didn't know was that the someone was a 17-year-old girl who had just demonstrated marksmanship skills that would impress a trained sniper. Maya watched the helicopter approaching and tried to determine whose side it was on. The aircraft bore no clear identifying markings, and its aggressive flight pattern suggested hostile intent. Then she saw the missile launch. The rocket streaked across the water toward one of the remaining enemy boats, striking it amidships and lifting the entire vessel out of the water in a massive explosion. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but debris and oil slicks. "American military," Wei shouted, recognizing the helicopter's configuration. Maya felt a surge of relief that lasted exactly 3 seconds. That's when she realized the surviving enemy boat was now heading directly toward them at maximum speed, its crew apparently deciding that if they were going to die, they'd take the fishing family with them. The enemy boat was less than 200 meters away and closing fast. Maya could see the hatred and desperation on the faces of the surviving crew members. They had lost their mission, lost their commander, and lost most of their force. But they still had enough firepower to sink one fishing boat and everyone aboard it. Maya raised her rifle for what she knew might be her final shots. The enemy boat was moving too fast and erratically for easy targeting, but she had to try. Her fourth shot shattered the boat's steering mechanism, causing it to veer wildly to port. Her fifth shot disabled its engine. But the boat's momentum was carrying it directly toward the Lucky Dragon like a guided missile. "Collision!" Wei screamed. Maya dropped her rifle and dove toward her family as the enemy boat struck them amidships with a grinding crash of metal and wood. The impact threw everyone across the deck and opened a gaping hole in the Lucky Dragon's hull just above the waterline. Water began pouring into the boat's interior as both vessels locked together in a tangle of twisted metal and rope. Maya struggled to her feet and saw enemy soldiers climbing aboard their boat, weapons raised, and murder in their eyes. That's when she realized that her rifle was lying on the deck just out of reach, and she was about to face trained killers in hand-to-hand combat with nothing but her bare hands and the survival instinct her father had taught her during their years on the dangerous waters. The morning that had started with peaceful fishing was about to become the kind of close-quarters battle that would test every lesson Maya had ever learned about courage, determination, and the will to protect the people she loved most in the world. Maya's world exploded into chaos as the first enemy soldier landed on the deck of the Lucky Dragon. She rolled toward her rifle, but a boot kicked it away before her fingers could close around the stock. Looking up, she found herself staring into the barrel of an assault rifle held by a man whose face was twisted with rage and desperation. "You killed Hassan," The soldier screamed in accented English. "You destroyed everything." Maya's mind raced through the hand-to-hand combat techniques she'd learned from online military tutorials. Her father had always told her that fishing required quick reflexes and problem-solving under pressure, but she'd never imagined those skills might save her life in actual combat. The soldier's finger tightened on the trigger, but his anger made him careless. Instead of shooting immediately, he wanted to savor his revenge. That hesitation gave Maya the opening she needed. She swept her leg across the wet deck, catching the soldier's ankle and sending him tumbling backward. As he fell, his rifle discharged harmlessly into the air, the burst of automatic fire alerting everyone within miles that the battle was far from over. Maya scrambled to her feet and dove for her rifle, but 2 more enemy soldiers were already climbing aboard from their damaged boat. Behind her, she could hear her father struggling with another attacker, while her mother screamed for Tommy to stay below deck. The rifle was just beyond her reach when a hand grabbed her ankle and yanked her backward. Maya twisted around to see one of the enemy soldiers drawing a combat knife, his intention clear. Close-quarters fighting was about to become deadly personal. Maya had never been in a real knife fight, but she'd studied enough military manuals to understand the basics. Keep moving, control the weapon hand, use anything available as a shield or weapon. The fishing boat's deck was cluttered with equipment that suddenly became potential lifesavers. She grabbed a coil of heavy rope and swung it like a club, catching the soldier across the face and buying herself a few precious seconds. But the man was trained in combat, and he recovered quickly, slashing at her with a knife in a pattern that forced her to retreat toward the boat's edge. That's when Wei Chun proved that 30 years of handling dangerous fish and rough seas had given him his own kind of combat skills. Maya's father appeared behind the knife-wielding soldier like a fury, swinging a heavy fishing gaff with the precision of someone who'd used it to land 1,000-pound marlin. The steel hook caught the soldier in the shoulder and spun him around, giving Maya the chance she needed to kick the knife from his hand. "Get your rifle," Wei shouted as he grappled with the wounded soldier. But Maya could see that more enemy fighters were preparing to board from their damaged vessel. Even if she reached her rifle, they were outnumbered and outgunned. The Lucky Dragon was taking on water, their engine was failing, and they were running out of time and options. That's when the sound of salvation reached them across the water. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's SEAL team had reached the shoreline and assessed the situation through high-powered optics. What they saw defied belief. A civilian fishing family engaged in close-quarters combat with trained enemy soldiers and apparently holding their own. "Sir," Morrison's sniper called, "that fishing boat has been fighting these hostiles for over 10 minutes. And they're winning." Morrison studied the scene through his binoculars. The fishing boat was damaged and listing, but its occupants were still fighting with a ferocity that impressed even his battle-hardened team. "Who the hell are these people?" he muttered. The answer came when he saw Maya break free from her attacker, roll across the deck, and come up with her rifle in a move that would have made a Navy SEAL proud. Her first shot took down the soldier who'd been grappling with her father. Her second shot shattered the outboard motor of the enemy boat, preventing any more hostiles from boarding. "That's a sniper," Morrison realized. "A damn good one." Maya's third shot proved him right. From the unstable platform of a damaged fishing boat, while under direct fire from multiple enemies, she placed a bullet through the eye of a soldier who was aiming at her younger brother. The precision required for such a shot under those conditions was extraordinary. Morrison made a decision that went against every protocol in the book. All units were providing immediate fire support to the fishing vessel. Treat them as friendlies. "Sir, we don't know who they are," his radio operator protested. "I know enough," Morrison replied. "Anyone who can fight like that against these odds deserves our help." The first indication Maya had that the cavalry was coming was when sniper fire began picking off enemy soldiers with mechanical precision. One moment the deck of the damaged enemy boat was crowded with hostile fighters. The next it was empty except for the dead and wounded. Maya looked toward shore and saw muzzle flashes from concealed positions among the rocks. professional soldiers, firing with the kind of accuracy that only came from years of training and combat experience. American military, Wei shouted, recognizing the distinctive sound of NATO ammunition. But Maya was already assessing their new tactical situation. The immediate threat from enemy borders had been eliminated, but the Lucky Dragon was still sinking. The collision had opened a hole below the waterline that was too large to repair at sea. "Dad, we need to abandon ship," she called. Wei looked at the boat that had been his life's work, now listing heavily to starboard as water poured through her damaged hull. The decision tore his heart, but he could see that his daughter was right. "Get the life preservers," he ordered, "and grab the emergency kit." Maya secured her rifle and helped her family prepare for what was going to be a dangerous transition to the water. The enemy boat was sinking even faster than theirs, creating a debris field of fuel, oil, and wreckage that would make swimming hazardous. That's when she heard the helicopter returning. Morrison's extraction helicopter had been monitoring the battle from a safe distance, waiting for the ground team's signal. When the pilot saw the fishing boat beginning to sink, he made his approach without waiting for orders. "Rescue situation," he radioed to Morrison. "That family is going into the water." Maya helped Tommy into a life vest, then turned to assist her mother. But as she did, she noticed movement in the water that made her blood run cold. One of the enemy soldiers from the sunken boat was still alive, and he was swimming toward them with a grenade in his hand. The man had been knocked unconscious during the collision and had regained consciousness underwater. Emerging from the debris field like something from a nightmare, he was clearly prepared to take the Chun family with him in a final act of vengeance. Maya raised her rifle, but the target was low in the water and moving erratically. The shot would be nearly impossible, especially from the unstable platform of the sinking boat. "Grenade in the water!" she shouted, hoping the SEALs onshore would hear and respond. Morrison heard the warning through his team's audio equipment and immediately understood the threat. But his snipers didn't have a clear shot at a target that low in the water, and the helicopter was too far away to help in time. Maya steadied her rifle against the boat's rail and tried to calculate the physics of the shot. A moving target in choppy water at extreme range while standing on a sinking platform. The variables were overwhelming. But as she watched the enemy soldier pull the pin on the grenade, Maya realized that impossible shots were sometimes the only option. Her father had taught her that fishing required patience, precision, and the ability to make critical decisions under pressure. Military manuals had taught her about trajectory, wind compensation, and target prediction. Years of practice had given her the muscle memory to execute complex shots without conscious thought. All of that training condensed into a single moment as Maya held her breath, steadied her aim, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the grenade just as the soldier released it, detonating the explosive device harmlessly in midair instead of under the Lucky Dragon. The blast sent a column of water into the sky and eliminated the final threat to the Chun family, but it also accelerated the sinking of their boat. They now had less than 2 minutes before the Lucky Dragon went under completely. Morrison watched the impossible shot through his binoculars and felt his respect for the unknown sniper climb to new heights. In 15 years of special operations, he'd never seen marksmanship like that from anyone, military or civilian. "Get that helicopter in there now," he ordered. "Those people are going into the water, and I want them extracted immediately." As the rescue helicopter thundered toward them, Maya helped her family prepare for the most dangerous few minutes of their lives. The Lucky Dragon was going down, but they had fought for their survival against overwhelming odds and won. The battle that had started with a peaceful fishing trip was about to end with a military extraction that would change their lives forever. But Maya didn't know that her demonstration of courage and skill had just earned her an invitation to join the most elite fighting force in the world. The SEALs have been looking for exceptional recruits. They had just found someone who exceeded every standard they had ever set. The rescue helicopter's rotor wash created a hurricane of spray and wind as it hovered over the sinking Lucky Dragon. Maya shielded her eyes and watched a figure rappel down from the aircraft with the fluid precision of someone who had performed this maneuver hundreds of times. The SEAL who landed on their deck moved with an economy of motion that immediately marked him as elite military. He was tall, lean, and carried himself with the quiet confidence that comes from surviving more dangerous situations than most people could imagine. His equipment was state-of-the-art, his weapons were immaculate, and his eyes missed nothing as he quickly assessed the tactical situation. "I'm Petty Officer Rodriguez," he announced over the helicopter noise. "We're here to get you out of this mess." Maya noticed that Rodriguez's gaze lingered on her rifle and the scattered brass casings around her position. His expression shifted from professional concern to something approaching awe as he processed the evidence of what had happened on this deck. "Ma'am, was that your shooting we observed from shore?" Rodriguez asked Maya directly. She nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious about the attention. Rodriguez looked at the debris field around them, the burning enemy boats, and the precise placement of bullet holes in various targets. Then, he looked back at Maya with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "Outstanding work," he said simply, but his tone carried weight that suggested he didn't give such compliments lightly. The helicopter's crew chief lowered a rescue basket, and Rodriguez began the process of evacuating the Chin family. Tommy went first, his excitement at riding in a military helicopter briefly overcoming his fear of the dangerous situation. Lily followed, clutching the family's emergency documents and the few personal items she'd managed to salvage. Wei hesitated at the edge of the sinking boat, looking back at the Lucky Dragon with the grief of someone watching his life's work disappear beneath the waves. "Sir," Rodriguez said gently, "I know what that boat means to you, but you and your family fought like warriors today. That's worth more than any vessel." Maya was the last to enter the rescue basket, but not before Rodriguez asked her a question that would change the trajectory of her entire life. "Miss, have you ever considered military service?" Maya looked at him in surprise. "I'm 17 years old, and I'm not even American." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Age is just a number when you can shoot like that. And as for citizenship, well, there are ways to work around that for the right candidate." As they ascended toward the helicopter, Maya could see the full scope of the morning's battle laid out below them. The enemy boats were nothing but burning wrecks and debris fields. The Lucky Dragon was slipping beneath the surface, leaving only an oil slick and floating equipment to mark where the Chun family's old life had ended. Inside the helicopter, Maya found herself sitting across from Lieutenant Commander Morrison himself. The SEAL leader was studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, but also strangely proud. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Morrison said over the engine noise, "and I've never seen shooting like what you demonstrated today. Where did you learn to handle a rifle like that?" Maya explained her father's basic training and her self-directed study of military manuals and techniques. Morrison listened carefully, occasionally asking technical questions that tested her knowledge of ballistics, tactics, and combat theory. What amazed him wasn't just her natural shooting ability, but the tactical thinking she demonstrated throughout the engagement. The decision to attack instead of flee, the precise targeting of critical systems, the split-second adaptation to changing circumstances. These were skills that took most soldiers years to develop. "Sir," Rodriguez interjected, "permission to speak freely?" Morrison nodded. "That girl just accomplished what some of our best snipers couldn't have done under those conditions. Moving platform, multiple targets, civilian safety considerations, and she never missed a critical shot." Maya felt herself blushing under the praise, but Morrison's next words brought her back to reality. "Miss Chun, what happened today is going to attract a lot of attention from people you probably don't want to meet. Military intelligence, government recruiters, possibly hostile forces looking for revenge. Your life just became very complicated." The helicopter was approaching a naval vessel that Maya recognized as a destroyer from her study of military equipment. The deck was bustling with activity as medical personnel and intelligence officers prepared to debrief everyone involved in the morning's operation. What's going to happen to my family? Maya asked. Morrison's expression softened slightly. That depends partly on what you decide to do next. As they prepared to land on the destroyer's deck, Maya realized that the morning's events had created a fork in the road of her life. She could return to her family's fishing business, try to rebuild what they'd lost, and hope that the attention from today's battle would eventually fade. Or she could accept what was clearly going to be an invitation to enter a world of training, missions, and dangers that most people never imagined. The helicopter touched down on the destroyer's deck, and Maya stepped out into a whirlwind of activity. Medical personnel immediately began examining her family for injuries, while intelligence officers prepared detailed debriefings about the enemy forces they'd encountered. But Maya's attention was drawn to a group of men standing apart from the general activity. They wore civilian clothes, but their bearing and the way other military personnel deferred to them marked them as very important people. Morrison guided Maya toward this group, his hand on her shoulder in a gesture that was both protective and proprietary. "Gentlemen," Morrison announced, "meet Maya Chun, the sniper who turned today's disaster into a victory." The lead civilian, a man with silver hair and eyes like a hawk, stepped forward and extended his hand. "Miss Chun, I'm Director Walsh from Naval Special Operations Command. I've been hearing some very interesting reports about your performance today." Maya shook his hand and tried to project confidence despite feeling completely out of her depth. "Sir, I was just trying to protect my family." Director Walsh smiled thinly. "Miss Chun, do you realize that you've just demonstrated skills that we spend millions of dollars and years of training trying to develop in our special operations candidates?" Maya looked around at the faces surrounding her and realized that everyone was waiting for her response to a question that hadn't yet been asked directly. "What we're wondering," Walsh continued, "is whether you'd be interested in making those skills official." The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Maya thought about her family's destroyed boat, their uncertain financial future, and the ordinary life that had been shattered by the morning's violence. But she also thought about the feeling of absolute clarity that had come over her during the battle, the sense that she had found something she was naturally gifted at, something that could make a real difference in a dangerous world. "I need to talk to my family," Maya said finally. "Of course," Walsh replied, "but I should tell you that this kind of opportunity doesn't come around often. What you did today suggests you have the potential to become one of the most effective special operations personnel we've ever trained." As Maya rejoined her family from medical evaluation and debriefing, she carried with her the weight of a decision that would define the rest of her life. The 17-year-old girl who had woken up that morning thinking about fish and homework was gone forever. In her place was someone who had faced mortal combat and emerged victorious, someone who had caught the attention of the military's most elite units, someone who would have to choose between the safety of an ordinary life and the dangerous calling of a warrior. The battle in the South China Sea was over, but Maya Chin's real war was just beginning. Over the next several hours, as military intelligence officers debriefed every participant in the morning's action, a picture emerged that would become legend in special operations circles around the world. Maya had fired exactly 11 shots during the engagement. Every single one had found its intended target with devastating effectiveness. She had disabled 3 enemy boats, eliminated 7 hostile combatants, and saved not only her own family, but also provided crucial support for the SEAL team's escape. Most remarkably, she had accomplished all of this while protecting civilian lives and minimizing collateral damage, something that even experienced military personnel often struggled to achieve in combat situations. The after-action reports would eventually classify Maya's performance as exceptional by any standard and unprecedented for an untrained civilian. But the dry language of military documentation couldn't capture the reality of what people had witnessed that morning. Maya Chun had taken her first step toward becoming the most legendary sniper in modern military history. But first, she had to decide if she was willing to leave behind everything she'd ever known to answer a calling that might destroy her or transform her into something extraordinary. The choice was hers, and the entire special operations community was waiting to see what she would decide. 3 months later, Maya Chun stood at the edge of a training facility that officially didn't exist on any government map. The morning sun cast long shadows across the obstacle courses, shooting ranges, and tactical training areas that would become her second home for the next 2 years. Around her, the most elite military personnel in the world were beginning another day of training that pushed human capabilities to their absolute limits. Maya had made her decision 6 weeks after the rescue, but the path to this moment had been anything but simple. The first challenge had been convincing her parents. Wei Chun had initially been horrified by the idea of his daughter joining the military, especially after witnessing firsthand the dangers that such a life entailed. But Lily had surprised everyone by becoming Maya's strongest advocate. "Our daughter has a gift," she had told Wei during one of their many late-night discussions aboard the temporary housing provided by the Navy. And more than that, she has the courage to use it for something greater than herself. The second challenge had been the bureaucratic maze of citizenship requirements, age waivers, and security clearances that normally took years to process. But Director Walsh had made it clear that Maya's case was exceptional, and suddenly, documents were expedited, requirements were waived, and doors that should have been closed opened with surprising ease. The third challenge had been the most difficult of all, leaving her family behind to enter a world where she would be the youngest, least experienced, and most scrutinized recruit in the program's history. Standing at the training facility now, Maya thought about the conversation she'd had with her father the night before her departure. "Are you sure about this?" Wei had asked, his voice heavy with concern and pride in equal measure. "Dad, remember what you always told me about fishing in deep water?" Maya had replied, "The biggest catches require taking the biggest risks." Wei had smiled at that, recognizing his own wisdom reflected back at him by the daughter who had grown up so much in just a few short months. Now, as Maya reported to her first day of what the military euphemistically called advanced training, she carried with her not just her natural abilities, but also the lessons learned from a fishing boat family that had taught her the value of hard work, calculated risk-taking, and protecting the people who mattered most. Her training instructor was a man she recognized from the rescue operation, Petty Officer Rodriguez, though he now wore the insignia of a Chief Petty Officer, a promotion that had come through shortly after his recommendation of Maya for the special program. "Chun," Rodriguez called as she approached the formation of other recruits, front and center. Maya moved to the position he indicated and found herself face-to-face with 19 other candidates, all of them older, all of them with prior military experience, all of them looking at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodriguez announced, "meet the recruit who's already seen more combat than half of you will experience in your entire careers." The words were meant to establish Maya's credibility, but she could see that they had the opposite effect on several of her fellow candidates. Being singled out on the first day was rarely a good thing in military training. Rodriguez seemed to recognize this and quickly moved the group into their first exercise, a marksmanship assessment that would establish baseline capabilities for each recruit. Maya had been dreading this moment. Her performance in actual combat had been driven by adrenaline, desperation, and life-or-death stakes. Reproducing those results on a controlled shooting range, under the scrutiny of instructors and peers, felt like an entirely different challenge. The targets were standard military silhouettes at ranges from 100 to 800 meters. Each recruit would fire from multiple positions using various weapon systems, with their scores determining their placement in the training hierarchy. Maya watched as the other candidates demonstrated the professional competence expected of special operations personnel. Their shooting was accurate, consistent, and technically proficient. Several posted scores that would have been considered exceptional in most military units. When her turn came, Maya approached the firing line with the same rifle she'd been carrying on that fateful morning 3 months earlier. Director Walsh had arranged for her to keep the weapon, both as a symbolic gesture and because Maya had demonstrated an almost supernatural connection with that particular firearm. Her first shot at the 100-meter target punched through the exact center of the silhouette's head area. Her second shot, at 300 meters, did the same. By her fifth shot, at 600 meters, the other recruits had stopped their own activities to watch. Maya's final shot was at an 800-meter target, a distance that challenged even experienced military marksmen using standard infantry weapons. The target was barely visible without magnification, just a dark shape wavering in the heat distortion of the distant range. Maya controlled her breathing, calculated for wind drift and bullet drop, and squeezed the trigger with the same steady pressure her father had taught her years earlier when they were hunting wild boar in the hills behind their village. The spotting scope confirmed what everyone had suspected, another perfect center hit. Rodriguez looked at Maya's target groupings and shook his head in amazement. In 15 years of training special operations personnel, he'd never seen marksmanship like this from anyone, regardless of experience level. "Chun," he called, "step forward." Maya approached, wondering if she had somehow done something wrong despite the perfect scores. "Do you understand what you just accomplished?" Rodriguez asked. Maya looked at her targets, then at the faces of her fellow recruits, and realized that her natural abilities had just set expectations that would follow her through every day of training. "I shot where I was aiming, Chief," she replied simply. Rodriguez almost smiled at that. "Chun, you just posted scores that are better than our current instructor standards, at ranges that challenge our most experienced snipers, using iron sights." The implications of this began to sink in for Maya. She wasn't just exceptionally talented, she was operating at a level that redefined what was considered possible. Over the following weeks, Maya's training intensified in ways that challenged every aspect of her physical and mental capabilities. Physical conditioning pushed her body to its limits. Tactical instruction filled her mind with the complexities of modern warfare. Technical training introduced her to weapons systems and equipment that represented the cutting edge of military technology. But it was during the advanced marksmanship courses that Maya truly began to understand the extent of her unique abilities. Instructor after instructor watched her perform shots that they had considered impossible. Moving targets at extreme range. Multiple targets engaged in rapid succession. Precision shots through minimal openings while under simulated combat stress. Maya consistently achieved results that forced her instructors to redesign their training scenarios and revise their understanding of human marksmanship potential. More importantly, she began to develop the broader skill set that would make her not just an exceptional sniper, but a complete special operations professional. Tactical planning, team leadership, advanced combat techniques, intelligence analysis, all areas where her natural intelligence and dedication to study allowed her to excel. By the end of her first year of training, Maya had earned the respect not just of her fellow recruits, but of the instructors who had initially been skeptical about training someone so young and inexperienced. Chief Rodriguez, who had become something of a mentor to Maya, summed up her progress in terms that would become part of her permanent military record. "Recruit Chun has demonstrated abilities that exceed our highest expectations and establish new benchmarks for special operations training. Her marksmanship skills are unprecedented, but more importantly, her tactical thinking, leadership potential, and dedication to the mission make her an ideal candidate for our most demanding assignments." But Maya's real test came during the final training exercise, a complex scenario that would determine not just her graduation from the program, but her assignment to operational units. The exercise simulated a hostage rescue operation in an urban environment. Multiple enemy positions, civilian hostages, time pressure, and the kind of tactical complexity that had broken many otherwise capable candidates. Maya's role was primary sniper, responsible for eliminating specific high-value targets while supporting the assault team's advance. The shots required were technically challenging, but Maya had proven her marksmanship abilities countless times over the past year. What made this exercise special was that it was being observed by Director Walsh and a group of senior military officials who would decide Maya's future assignment. As Maya took her position on a building overlooking the exercise area, She thought about the journey that had brought her from a fishing boat in the South China Sea to this rooftop in an advanced military training facility. The teenage girl who had started this journey was gone, replaced by someone who understood the weight of life and death decisions and the responsibility that came with exceptional abilities. Maya's first target appeared in a third-floor window 400 meters away. The shot was complicated by the presence of a hostage just inches from the enemy fighter, requiring precision that left no room for error. Maya's bullet found its mark with surgical accuracy, eliminating the threat without endangering the civilian. Over the next 30 minutes, Maya provided fire support that allowed the assault team to complete their mission with 0 casualties and all hostages rescued. Her shooting was flawless, but more importantly, her tactical decisions and communication with the ground team demonstrated the kind of professional competence that justified all the resources that had been invested in her training. When the exercise concluded, Director Walsh approached Maya with a document that would define the next phase of her military career. "Congratulations, Petty Officer Chun," he said, using her new rank for the first time. "You've just earned assignment to SEAL Team 6. Maya looked at the orders in her hand and realized that she was about to join the most elite military unit in the world, becoming the youngest operative in the unit's history. The fishing boat battle that had started her journey was now legendary throughout the special operations community. But Maya Chin knew that her real story was just beginning. She had transformed herself from a teenager with natural shooting ability into a fully trained special operations professional. Now she would have the chance to prove that the faith placed in her abilities had been justified. The SEALs had called their original mission over when everything went wrong in the South China Sea. But Maya's emergence from those same waters had created something unprecedented, a warrior whose legend would grow with every mission, every impossible shot, and every life saved by her extraordinary abilities. The girl who had risen from the water that day had become the sniper that military forces around the world would talk about for decades to come. And her story was just getting started.